You are used to walking into a library and seeing monuments of absolute truth. But tomorrow, you realize those monuments are made of ash. Half of the textbooks you studied in school, half of the medical protocols your doctors follow, and half of the psychological facts you blindly trust are mathematically invalid. This is not a conspiracy theory born in the dark corners of the internet. It is a cold, peer-reviewed, statistical reality. While you sit there, pharmaceutical conglomerates are burning billions of dollars on clinical trials chasing phantoms. Patients are swallowing useless, sometimes dangerous medications engineered from ghost data. If you do not understand the mechanics of how modern science is failing, you are navigating the 21st century with a broken compass. You remain utterly vulnerable to every polished headline and every charismatic expert selling a statistical lie. But this collapse is not the end of discovery. It is a necessary demolition. I'm going to hand you the intellectual X-ray vision of a meta-researcher. You will learn the exact mathematical cheat codes required to spot fake science hidden in plain sight. Together, we will witness the radical, silent revolution that is currently rebuilding human knowledge from the ground up, engineering a system where it becomes mathematically impossible to lie with data. A heavy brass pendulum swings erratically, smashing into a line of steel dominoes that represent the fundamental pillars of behavioral science. To the meta-researcher sitting in the windowless data vault, the physical collapse mirrors the digital one. On the glowing monitor, a simple replication script finishes compiling. The screen violently flashes red with a single word: failed. It is the physical sensation of absolute certainty turning to vapor. The first tremors of this systemic earthquake did not start with a scandal, but with an elegant equation. In 2005, a deeply provocative, highly cited paper dropped a bomb on the academic establishment. It mathematically proved that, based on the statistical models we use, most published research findings are inherently false. We were programmed to believe that peer review was a flawless filter. We were completely wrong. The researcher staring at the flashing red screen feels a cynical amusement giving way to relentless determination. The paper was not attacking fringe theories. It was attacking the core methodology of elite institutions. It demonstrated that the frantic pursuit of groundbreaking discoveries had turned the scientific method into a casino. And in this incredibly high-stakes casino, the house was quietly losing its grip on reality. 10 years later, the theoretical warning became a bloody battlefield. By 2015, a massive collaborative project attempted to do something shockingly simple: replicate 100 classic, textbook psychology experiments. These were the foundational studies taught in every university on Earth. When the dust settled, only 39 of those experiments yielded their original results. 61% of accepted academic dogma simply evaporated under scrutiny. The official narrative you were taught is a myth. The human brain, behavior, and social dynamics are incredibly noisy, complex systems. Yet, for decades, scientists published perfectly clean, elegant results that painted a beautifully simple picture of human nature. The meta-researcher looks at the failed replication codes and understands the dark truth. Those clean results were artificially scrubbed. Reality is never that neat, and data is rarely that compliant. The infection was not limited to psychology. It had metastasized into the hard sciences. A 2016 survey of over 1,500 researchers across multiple disciplines revealed a terrifying metric. Over 70% of these elite scientists admitted They had failed to reproduce another researcher's experiment. Think about the sheer scale of that failure. 7 out of 10 foundational building blocks of modern discovery crumbled the moment someone else touched them. But the statistics hide an even more devastating paradox. It is one thing to fail at recreating a rival's complex methodology in a different laboratory. It is quite another to fail yourself. Even more shocking than the previous metric, over 50% of those surveyed confessed they could not even reproduce their own previous experiments when they tried them a second time. The architects of our modern world were building bridges that collapsed when they tried to cross them again. To the meta-researcher, this is not just an embarrassing academic glitch. It is a catastrophic flaw in the very machinery of human progress. We've built an entire global civilization, our medicine, our economics, our technology, on the assumption that a published paper is a permanent brick in the wall of knowledge. Instead, we discover that we've been building our greatest achievements on a foundation of shifting, unverified, statistical sand. This brings us to a fundamental cognitive trap, a mathematical blind spot that has fooled the greatest minds of our generation. Consider the coin toss paradox. If a scientist flips a coin and gets heads 10 times in a row, is it a brilliant, publishable breakthrough in the laws of physics? Or is it simply survivor bias, intentionally ignoring the 10,000 other scientists who flipped tails and quietly threw their coins in the trash? We have systematically confused statistical noise with profound truth, creating a dangerous illusion of certainty. The establishment wants you to believe that science is a static, infallible database of facts. But to survive the 21st century, you must understand how easily the data can be tortured into confessing a lie. The entire system is broken, which leaves us with one terrifying question. How did an entire generation of geniuses get it so fundamentally wrong? How did an entire generation of geniuses get it so fundamentally wrong? The answer is not malice. It is mathematics. Step onto a smoky, neon-lit casino floor. Here, the dealer is not dealing blackjack. He is a researcher in a white coat, shuffling a massive deck of biological data over and over again. He deals hand after hand, discarding the junk, waiting for that one miraculous royal flush. In this casino of data, you do not need to be a brilliant scientist to make a world-changing discovery. You just need enough time to keep pulling the lever on the slot machine. The house always wins, but here, the house is the human ego desperate for a breakthrough. We're going to look at a fundamental mathematical glitch that allowed this to happen, a concept I call the jelly bean anomaly. Let us test a completely absurd medical theory. You want to prove that eating jelly beans cures acne. You conduct a rigorous, highly expensive clinical trial. The results come back, and obviously there is absolutely no link between candy and clear skin. A normal person accepts defeat and stops there. But a researcher, desperate for funding, does not stop. They just change the parameters of the game. You decide to test specific colors. You run independent clinical trials on purple jelly beans, brown jelly beans, pink, blue, and yellow. You test 20 different colors in total, feeding them to 20 different control groups. You are blindly throwing darts at a board, hoping one strikes dead center. And because of the fundamental rules of statistics, one of them eventually will. To understand why this happens, I need to show you the golden rule of modern science. The p-value. For decades, a p-value of less than 0.05 has been the absolute holy grail. It is the magic number that dictates whether a result is considered statistically significant and worthy of publication in a major journal, or if it is just random background noise to be discarded. What does a p-value of 0.05 actually mean? It simply means there is exactly a 5% chance that your experimental result happened by pure, unadulterated luck. It is a mathematical margin of error, a reluctant acknowledgement that the universe is chaotic, and sometimes coincidences just happen. Now, bring that mathematical margin of error back to our jelly bean anomaly. If you test 20 random, completely useless hypotheses, pure mathematical probability dictates that one of them will hit that 0.05 threshold by sheer luck. 5% of 20 is exactly 1. You have mathematically guaranteed a false positive just by rolling the scientific dice enough times. Suddenly, the trial for green jelly beans lights up the board. The data shows a statistically significant link to curing acne. It is a completely meaningless fluke, a phantom pattern born from statistical static. But on paper, it looks exactly like a groundbreaking medical discovery. You have just successfully manipulated reality without deliberately faking a single piece of raw data. This statistical loophole birthed a catastrophic practice known across laboratories as p-hacking. It is the dark art of slicing, dicing, and relentlessly rerunning datasets until a statistically significant pattern emerges from pure noise. You drop an outlier here. You change a demographic variable there. You run the simulation overnight until the computer finally spits out that coveted 0.05. P-hacking is not about scientists twirling their mustaches and explicitly forging numbers in the shadows. It is a pervasive intellectual virus. Brilliant researchers genuinely convince themselves they are uncovering hidden truths, when in reality, they are just torturing the data until it confesses to exactly what they want to hear. The math is completely blind to their psychological bias. But the illusion is not complete until we address the rest of the evidence. What happens to the 19 tests that failed? Researchers call this the file drawer effect. Those 19 perfectly valid but entirely boring experiments showing that jelly beans do nothing are literally locked in a drawer. They are never published, never peer-reviewed, and kept completely hidden from you. Return to our dealer on the neon-lit casino floor. When he finally slaps that royal flush onto the green felt, the crowd goes wild. They see a visionary genius, a master of the cards. What they do not see are the hundreds of discarded, worthless hands swept quietly under the table. Only the one lucky anomaly is published and celebrated as a groundbreaking, textbook-altering discovery. You have been reading the headlines, buying the dietary supplements, and trusting the university textbooks based entirely on these isolated royal flushes. We built a modern civilization on an optical illusion, rewarding the lucky over the accurate. And as I will show you next, this casino does not just deal in candy. It deals in the cutthroat academic currency that dictates the survival of the smartest people on Earth. We know the weapon these minds use to bend reality. The statistical sleight of hand we call p-hacking. But to truly understand a crime, you must look past the murder weapon and find the motive. Why would the most brilliant intellects on our planet systematically torture their own data until it confesses to a lie? The answer is brutally simple, and it requires you to strip away your romanticized view of discovery. To find the truth, you must follow the money. Step onto the frantic, deafening floor of the global academic stock exchange. Through the eyes of the meta-researcher, this is not a quiet laboratory of contemplation. The massive digital screens above the screaming brokers are not tracking corporate stocks. They're flashing academic journal impact factors. Every tick upward represents millions in grant money. Down on the floor, citations are aggressively traded like hostile corporate takeovers. You were taught to revere the scientific method as a noble pursuit, an intellectual monastery where selfless geniuses seek only the absolute truth. I'm here to shatter that comfortable myth. Modern science is a hyper-competitive, cutthroat corporate ladder where uncovering a boring truth will absolutely get you fired. The ruling paradigm of this chaotic trading floor is a singular, terrifying ultimatum: publish or perish. To grasp the sheer scale of this hustle, look at the beneficiaries hovering above the chaos. Academic publishing is not a public service. It is a gargantuan, ruthless global industry. These publishing conglomerates boast profit margins frequently exceeding 30%. That is a level of pure financial extraction that directly rivals, and often surpasses, the most lucrative tech giants operating in Silicon Valley. The economic model is a masterpiece of exploitation. Taxpayers fund the initial research. Scientists, desperate for prestige, surrender their copyright for free. Other scientists conduct the rigorous peer review, also entirely for free. The publisher then takes this completely subsidized product, locks it behind an exorbitant paywall, and sells it back to the very same universities at a massive premium. It is a brilliant, legally sanctioned monopoly. But the rot goes much deeper than corporate greed. It infects the very definition of success. When a scientist stands before a university tenure committee or a federal grant board, nobody wants to hear that they spent 5 years rigorously verifying an old, established theory. These gatekeepers of capital do not reward caution. They strictly reward novel, flashy, and groundbreaking positive results. The system is addicted to the spectacular breakthrough. It demands a headline. If your experiment shows that an existing cancer drug is mildly effective, exactly as predicted, your career stalls. You become invisible to the algorithms of academic success. The meta-researcher watching the trading floor sees the inevitable result of this pressure cooker. A desperate scramble to find anomalies, to dig up the impossible, just to keep the laboratory lights on. Now consider the darkest paradox of this economic engine. Discovering that a highly anticipated new drug or a trendy psychological intervention does absolutely nothing is vital. A definitive negative result saves lives, redirects wasted funding, and protects human knowledge. Yet, a study proving that something does not work is considered toxic assets by the brokers. It is almost impossible to get a negative result published in a top-tier journal. The journals want the royal flush. They do not want to print the perfectly valid, mundane hands. Because boring reality does not generate media buzz, it does not attract venture capital, and it certainly does not boost a journal's precious impact factor. Therefore, the absolute truth of a failed experiment is quietly swept under the rug, leaving a massive, dangerous blind spot in our collective understanding of biology, physics, and medicine. What you are witnessing is a catastrophic evolutionary bottleneck. This environment creates a pure Darwinian nightmare. The meticulous, cautious researchers who rigorously double-check their work, who refuse to mathematically manipulate their way to a catchy headline, are systematically starved of funding. They are aggressively outcompeted by opportunists who rush out spectacular, completely fragile claims that look magnificent on a grant application. It is survival of the flashiest. The academic ecosystem actively selects against intellectual honesty and heavily subsidizes the reckless production of statistical noise. The meta-researcher watching the frantic trading floor realizes the chilling truth. The replication crisis is not a series of unfortunate accidents. It is the highly optimized, completely predictable output of a machine designed to prioritize profit and prestige over reality. You must understand that the researchers caught in this brutal machinery are not villains. They are hostages. When your mortgage, your laboratory staff, and your entire professional identity depend on crossing that arbitrary 0.05 threshold, your brain will find a way to justify bending the rules. The pressure to publish morphs the scientific method from a rigorous search for objective truth into an exercise in high-stakes public relations. This invisible academic stock market dictates everything from the materials in your smartphone to the syllabus in your child's classroom. But this intellectual bubble cannot expand infinitely. When fraudulent data is aggressively traded as absolute certainty, the inevitable market crash does not just wipe out bank accounts. As we step out of this theoretical casino and into the sterile light of a medical laboratory, you will see exactly how many lives a bad equation can cost. We are used to thinking of academic fraud as a victimless crime, a sterile glitch in a university database. But the mathematical corruption we just uncovered does not stay confined to the theoretical casino. The moment those manipulated datasets leave the trading floor of academic publishing, they mutate into physical reality. We have stepped out of the casino and into the blindingly clean environment of a modern neuroscience laboratory, where a massive brain protein model dominates the screen. To the observer in this high-tech facility, that glowing molecular structure is not just a biological mechanism. It is the holy grail of modern medicine. You are looking at the supposed biochemical trigger for the unraveling of the human mind. The official narrative told us that if we could just dismantle this specific protein, we could cure cognitive decline. But what happens when the foundational blueprint for 16 years of medical research turns out to be an absolute optical illusion? I need to show you the exact moment the compass broke. In 2006, a landmark paper hit the scientific community with the force of a revelation. The authors claimed to have identified a specific brain protein named amyloid beta star 56 as the definitive, undeniable cause of Alzheimer's disease. For a world desperate for answers to a terrifying condition, this was not just a breakthrough. It was the absolute paradigm shift the medical industry was aggressively craving. That single publication violently redirected the entire global focus of neuroscience. It was an intellectual black hole, pulling every available resource into its orbit. The paper triggered over 2,300 citations in subsequent academic literature. Think about the gravity of that number. Thousands of other scientists staked their own careers, built their own laboratories, and designed their own clinical trials based entirely on the absolute certainty of that one discovery. The financial floodgates violently snapped open. We are talking about billions in taxpayer-funded grants, pharmaceutical venture capital, and institutional investments pouring into this specific avenue of research. The academic gatekeepers did not care about verifying the basement. They cared about building the skyscraper. The entire apparatus of modern drug development pivoted to target amyloid beta star 56. A colossal medical infrastructure was built directly on top of this initial claim. You have been programmed to believe that the scientific method is a self-correcting machine, that a claim of this magnitude is instantly subjected to brutal, unforgiving scrutiny. That is a comforting misconception. In the publish or perish ecosystem we exposed earlier, nobody gets a multi-million-dollar grant for simply double-checking another scientist's work. The system aggressively incentivizes blind forward momentum, leaving the structural integrity of the research completely unchecked. Watch the screen in our laboratory as the beautiful, complex rotation of the protein suddenly falters. A harsh red warning light begins to pulse across the glass. The flawless mathematical model is breaking down. For over a decade and a half, researchers trying to build upon that 2006 paper experienced this exact glitch in their own work. Their experiments were failing, their data was messy, and their target protein was not behaving as the foundational textbook explicitly promised. But remember the file drawer effect. When a brilliant researcher failed to replicate the amyloid beta star 56 results, they did not blame the original, highly decorated paper. They blamed themselves. They assumed their methodology was flawed or their equipment was miscalibrated. They quietly locked their failed replications away, terrified that speaking out against the dominant, heavily funded narrative would instantly destroy their own fragile careers and sever their grant money. The facade finally shattered in 2022. An independent forensic investigation, operating outside the traditional compromised peer review cartel, turned its attention to those original, world-changing results. When they stripped away the academic prestige and applied ruthless digital analysis to the source material, the truth was horrifying. The critical images in that foundational paper appeared to be deliberately, digitally manipulated and crudely spliced together. The protein model on our screen violently dissolves into chaotic static. This was not a subtle statistical error or a minor case of p-hacking. This was the equivalent of photoshopping the biochemical blueprint of a disease. The investigators found duplicated bands, artificially altered contrast, and cloned visual data. The cornerstone of the global fight against cognitive decline was essentially a fabricated collage designed to perfectly satisfy the arbitrary demands of a premier academic journal. I want the absolute gravity of this anomaly to crush your previous worldview. 16 years of grueling clinical trials, aggressive pharmaceutical development, and desperate patient hope were largely built on a phantom foundation. For over half a generation, the brightest neurological minds on the planet were effectively hunting a ghost. This is the catastrophic, mathematically unforgiving cost of the replication crisis when it escapes the university campus and enters the hospital ward. This is why the statistics we explored earlier are not merely academic trivia. Every single false positive, every manipulated data point that sneaks past a corrupted peer review process, steals time we do not have. While the authors of that deceptive paper advanced their careers, real patients with deteriorating minds were funneled into experimental drug trials designed to attack a fictional target. It is a theft of human potential so vast that it is almost impossible to quantify. The illusion has completely collapsed. We are standing in the wreckage of a trillion-dollar lie, watching billions of dollars burn in a digital furnace. If this scale of systemic failure blows your mind too, hit the like button right now. Do you think the patients and researchers who lost decades to this mirage ever stood a chance? Let me know in the comments below. And to ensure you do not miss the radical solution to this scientific mystery, you must subscribe to the channel immediately. You are staring into the abyss of a broken system, realizing that the guardians of truth were asleep at the wheel. The sheer scale of this intellectual horror is paralyzing. We trusted a centralized, ego-driven hierarchy to map the mechanics of reality, and they delivered a beautifully illustrated fiction. But the revelation of this deep rot is not the end of our journey. The very fact that this massive deception was eventually caught proves that a new paradigm is beginning to awaken. The old scientific method, built on blind trust and the fragile reputations of isolated geniuses, has definitively failed its stress test. The smoke from the burning medical data clears, leaving a terrifying void. But from this absolute zero point, a profound, visionary reconstruction is about to begin. We can no longer afford to trust the gatekeepers. We must engineer a mathematically unbreakable architecture of truth, where the sirens of data manipulation are permanently silenced. The Alzheimer's tragedy was the absolute dead end of the old world, a dark monument to a corrupt system. But you are about to see what happens when human intellect refuses to be defeated by its own flaws. Through the eyes of an open science architect, we step out of that burning wreckage and into a clean, blindingly bright room. A massive steel vault door swings open, heavy and silent. Inside lies the spark of a radical revolution, designed to make deception mathematically impossible. The architect approaches the center of the room, where a completely transparent glass box sits illuminated. Inside this flawless cube rests a single sealed document. You are programmed to believe that brilliant discoveries happen spontaneously, in a messy flash of midnight inspiration. But the architect knows the official narrative is a dangerous myth. Spontaneity in modern research is just an invitation to cheat. This sealed document represents the death of the academic hustle. To understand the power of this single piece of paper, you have to look at ancient Greek mythology. Think of the Ulysses Pact. To survive the lethal, hypnotic song of the sirens, Ulysses ordered his crew to tie him tightly to the ship's mast. He knew his future self would be weak, compromised, and willing to steer them all into the rocks. The modern scientist faces a siren song that is just as deadly. The intoxicating lure of prestige, funding, and statistically significant data. I have watched brilliant, well-intentioned researchers walk into the laboratory completely convinced of their own integrity. But when the grant money is running out and the raw data is sitting right there, begging to be tweaked just a tiny fraction of a percent, human psychology collapses. You cannot rely on willpower to fight a multi-billion-dollar incentive structure. You must bind your hands before the temptation even begins. You must lock your intentions in a transparent vault. This realization birthed an intellectual rebellion. To permanently break the cycle of fraud and ghost data, a new generation of rogue academics mobilized. They rejected the archaic, closed-door gentlemen's clubs of legacy journals and established the Center for Open Science. Their weapon of choice is a deceptively simple, brilliantly ruthless protocol known as pre-registration. It is the ultimate intellectual straitjacket, and it is reshaping the very fabric of human knowledge. Pre-registration attacks the disease at its root. It forces a scientist to publicly lock in their exact hypothesis, their rigorous methodology, and their precise statistical battle plan on a secure ledger. They must declare exactly how they will analyze the numbers before they are allowed to collect a single drop of data. The architect looking at that sealed document knows that once the parameters are set in stone, the casino is closed. The dealer cannot reshuffle the deck anymore. You already know the mechanics of p-hacking. You know how easy it is to slice and dice variables until a random anomaly looks like a cure for cancer. Pre-registration burns that entire strategy to the ground. If an ambitious researcher wants to test 20 different colors of jelly beans to find a fake correlation, they have to announce all 20 tests in advance. The mathematical glitch hiding in plain sight is instantly neutralized by the harsh, blinding light of prior disclosure. But the true genius of this system lies in how it handles failure. Under the old regime, 19 failed experiments were quietly swept under the rug. Now, if the pre-registered experiment fails, that negative result is permanently burned into an unalterable public server. The silence of the file drawer effect is shattered forever. We are finally building a graveyard of dead theories that is just as highly valued and just as visible as the towering monuments of scientific success. I want you to appreciate the radical beauty of this shift. For centuries, we viewed negative results as a shameful waste of time. But discovering that a synthetic compound does absolutely nothing to a rogue cancer cell is critical intelligence. It tells the next generation of doctors exactly where not to step. By forcing researchers to publish their misses alongside their hits, we are mapping the dark matter of scientific inquiry. We are charting the dead ends so others can survive. The rollout of this strict protocol provided the ultimate, devastating proof of our past delusions. When major psychology and medical journals began enforcing pre-registration, an incredible statistical purge occurred. The rate of spectacular, groundbreaking positive discoveries plummeted by over 60%. Let that sink in. Over half of the miraculous breakthroughs we used to celebrate simply vanished the moment scientists were physically prevented from moving the goalposts. You might look at that 60% drop and think the engine of human innovation has stalled out. You would be entirely wrong. The engine was never running that fast. The speedometer was simply rigged. That plummeting success rate proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the old, ego-driven system was artificially inflated by a massive bubble of fake certainty. The architect in the blinding white room is not mourning the loss of those fake discoveries. They are celebrating the purge. We are witnessing the painful, necessary collapse of an archaic mythology. The scientific method is finally being upgraded for the 21st century, stripped of human frailty and fortified by cryptographic discipline. By tying themselves to the mast, these rebel architects are guaranteeing that the medications you will take in 10 years are built on absolute, unshakable bedrock. The illusion of truth is dead, and the era of mathematically verified radical transparency has begun. Pre-registration is the ultimate shield, violently securing the future of all human discovery against the desperate temptations of the academic hustle. But securing the future is only half the war. We are still sitting on decades of highly cited, heavily funded research that was published before the vault doors were locked. To truly cleanse the system, we must look backward. We must unleash a new breed of digital bloodhounds to hunt down the phantoms still hiding in the archives. Pre-registration brilliantly secures our future, locking the vault doors against tomorrow's manipulations. But what exactly do we do with the past? We are still sitting on a mountain of poisoned data, decades of highly cited, heavily funded research that was published before those vault doors were ever installed. To truly cleanse the foundation of human knowledge, we cannot just look forward. We must deploy a new breed of digital bloodhounds to hunt down the phantoms still hiding in the archives. Through the eyes of the meta-researcher, the battlefield is not a physical laboratory, but a dark monitor filled with cascading lines of complex code. They are watching an artificial intelligence algorithm rip through a massive spreadsheet, highlighting specific data points and pulsing them in neon red. The machine is not calculating, it is hunting. It is looking for the microscopic fractures in the illusion of truth, the tiny mathematical inconsistencies that a human eye could never detect.
You have been taught that a brilliant scientist can fake anything if they are clever enough.
You were wrong. The human brain is a magnificent engine for recognizing patterns, but it is absolutely terrible at generating genuine randomness. When a desperate researcher decides to invent a data set out of thin air, they always leave behind a subconscious mathematical fingerprint. We call this fatal psychological flaw the terminal digit anomaly, and it is the ultimate trap for a liar.
If I asked you to generate a list of 1,000 random decimals, your brain would naturally favor certain ending numbers over others. You might unconsciously prefer 7s and 3s, while entirely avoiding 0s and 5s. In a truly natural data set, the final digits of your measurements should be distributed with uniform mechanical equality. But in a fabricated spreadsheet, the human bias aggressively warps that distribution, leaving a glaring sign of fraud. This is where the intellectual rebellion takes the offensive.
Independent statistical sleuths, most notably the brilliant team behind Data Colada, began weaponizing this forensic mathematics. They stopped taking published papers at face value and started treating them as potential crime scenes. By aggressively auditing the raw data of highly cited psychological and behavioral studies, they realized they could completely bypass the corrupt peer review process and uncover the objective truth.
These meta-researchers are not reading the text. They are interrogating the numbers. They use advanced, custom-built algorithms to automatically scan thousands of published papers, specifically looking for that terminal digit bias. The moment an algorithm detects that a scientist lazily invented their datasets by subconsciously favoring certain numbers, the system triggers an alarm. It is a mathematical lie detector test that you cannot beat because you do not even know you are failing it. You might think this only applies to spreadsheets and surveys, but the algorithmic dragnet is expanding at a terrifying, exhilarating speed. The old guard of academia believed their visual evidence was untouchable, buried deep within complex medical journals, where no single peer reviewer had the time to cross-reference every single pixel. They were operating under the archaic assumption that human oversight was the only threat to their fabricated empires. They completely underestimated the machines. Right now, specialized artificial intelligence tools are deployed to automatically scan millions of biomedical images across the global scientific archive. These algorithms do not suffer from fatigue. They instantly detect duplicated, rotated, or artificially cloned cells within a microscopic photograph. A researcher might have spent hours digitally splicing a crucial image in Photoshop, but the AI effortlessly exposes the fraud in milliseconds. This is the exact moment the power dynamic of the entire academic world permanently shifts. For decades, the system was rigged to protect the gatekeepers. A junior researcher would never dare question the data of a legendary, tenured professor, because that professor controlled their funding and their future. But an algorithm does not care about your reputation. An algorithm does not care how many grants you have secured or how many prestigious awards are sitting on your polished mahogany desk. The results of this unyielding digital scrutiny have been absolutely catastrophic for the old establishment. This relentless algorithmic dragnet has directly led to a massive, unprecedented spike in high-profile retractions. We are watching the real-time destruction of entire academic dynasties. The untouchable, tenured professors who thought they were entirely safe behind the complex walls of elite universities are waking up to find their life's work exposed as a statistical hallucination.
I want you to look at those soaring retraction rates not as a sign of failure, but as the ultimate triumph of the scientific method. Every time a fraudulent paper is ripped from the archives, a dead end is closed off. Every time an artificially manipulated image is flagged and deleted, millions of dollars in future grant money are instantly redirected away from a phantom cure and toward actual, verified reality. We are not burning down the library. We are finally exterminating the termites. You have been conditioned to panic when you see headlines about science being wrong. You have been programmed to view a retracted study as a crisis of faith in human intelligence. I'm telling you to completely rewire that perspective. A system that actively hunts down and destroys its own errors is the only system you should ever trust. The massive wave of retractions you are seeing today is the agonizing, glorious sound of a broken machine desperately repairing itself in real time. Look back at that dark monitor. The code continues to cascade, and the neon red alerts continue to pulse. The meta-researcher watching this screen is not feeling despair. They are feeling the cold, thrilling adrenaline of the hunt. They know that somewhere in the world, a fraudster is sleeping soundly, completely unaware that a piece of forensic software is currently ripping apart their foundational paper from the year 2010, pixel by pixel, and digit by digit. The beauty of this technological revolution is its absolute ruthlessness. You cannot bribe a statistical script. You cannot threaten an image recognition algorithm with a loss of academic tenure. The era of getting away with lazy, manipulated data is permanently over, because the digital bloodhounds do not sleep, and they have an infinite capacity to look backward. The ghosts of fake science have nowhere left to hide, and the false prophets of academia are finally running out of time. These algorithms are brilliantly purging the poison from our past, tearing down the frauds and reclaiming the integrity of our data. But catching a thief after the fact is not enough to build a permanent utopia. If we want to engineer an unbreakable science, we cannot just rely on digital watchdogs patrolling the old, corrupt publishing houses. We have to completely eradicate the publishers themselves. We have to replace the very architecture of human knowledge with something mathematically incorruptible. To build an architecture of human knowledge that is mathematically incorruptible, we cannot simply hire better guards for the same old prison. Look closely at this glowing, decentralized web of light expanding across the globe. Thousands of digital nodes are firing in perfect synchrony, instantly verifying a single stream of data. Through the eyes of the open science architect watching this network pulse, the old academic world looks like a dying, obsolete empire. For centuries, you were told that the ultimate arbiters of truth were a handful of elite, trillion-dollar publishing corporations. You believed that knowledge had to be locked behind massive paywalls and vetted in secret by anonymous rivals. But what if we simply fire the gatekeepers? The architect looking at this planetary grid is not asking for permission to change the rules of biology or physics. They are actively tearing down the toll booths of human discovery. This breathtaking digital frontier is called decentralized science, or DeSci. We are no longer relying on the fragile morality of an underpaid professor or the profit margins of a corporate journal. DeSci weaponizes the exact same blockchain technology that underpins global cryptocurrencies, but instead of trading financial assets, it creates an immutable, permanent ledger for scientific data. It is a paradigm shift that makes lying not just illegal, but fundamentally impossible. You have been conditioned to think of a scientific paper as a static document, a final, polished story where all the messy failures are hidden away.
The architect destroys that concept completely. In this new ecosystem, the data does not belong to the university, and it certainly does not belong to the publisher. The moment a reaction occurs in the laboratory, the results bypass the corrupt hierarchy entirely. The truth is no longer a manuscript. It is a live, undeniable network. Watch the exact moment a microscope or a mass spectrometer generates a reading. In the archaic system, a human would manually copy that number, leaving endless room for manipulation. Here, the raw data from the laboratory instrument is instantly encrypted and uploaded directly to the decentralized network. There is no middleman. There is no opportunity for a desperate researcher to massage the numbers to hit a required statistical threshold. The record is permanently sealed in milliseconds. Once that data block is locked into the global chain, retroactive tampering becomes mathematically impossible. To alter a single dropped pixel in a cell scan, or change one decimal point in a chemical analysis, a fraudster would have to simultaneously hack thousands of independent computers scattered across the earth. The architect does not need to trust the scientist's integrity anymore. The architecture itself enforces absolute, ruthless honesty at the level of the cryptographic code. But securing the raw data is only half the battle. The real intellectual rot always festered in the shadows of peer review. You were taught that peer review was a sacred, objective evaluation by the greatest minds. In reality, it was usually two exhausted, unpaid competitors rubber-stamping a paper or destroying it out of pure professional jealousy. The new decentralized protocol completely obliterates this dark room, pulling the entire evaluation process out into the blinding sunlight. Under this visionary model, peer review is no longer a secret handshake among a tiny academic cartel. It is aggressively crowdsourced and exposed to the entire planet. The open science architect programs smart contracts that actively incentivize the global community to tear the research apart. We are finally aligning human greed with the pursuit of truth. Instead of rewarding a scientist for publishing a flashy, fragile claim, the network financially rewards the critics who find the errors. Think of it as a permanent, global bounty on fake science. If a researcher claims to have cured a disease, they must stake their own digital reputation and funding on that claim. Thousands of independent statisticians and rival laboratories are immediately paid out by the smart contract if they can prove the hypothesis wrong. It is a brutally efficient, mathematically verified Darwinian arena. Only the most robust, undeniable discoveries can survive this level of decentralized warfare. This is how you cure the replication crisis at the root. You do not just ask people to be better. You build an environment where bad behavior is instantly penalized by the network. The architect monitors the nodes lighting up across the continents, watching funds automatically unlock as a global collective of minds verifies a complex protein structure. There are no editors, no hidden agendas, and no delayed publications. The speed of discovery is limited only by the speed of human thought. By successfully deploying this immutable infrastructure, we are executing the greatest transfer of intellectual wealth in human history. This decentralized protocol completely removes the trillion-dollar profit-driven publishing houses from the equation. Those massive corporate monoliths that suffocated innovation for decades, hoarding taxpayer-funded research behind insurmountable paywalls, are suddenly rendered entirely obsolete by a few thousand lines of elegant cryptographic code. We are returning the power of discovery directly to the global collective. The architect watches the old empire crumble, not with a bomb, but with a superior mathematical alternative. When a patient in Tokyo or a student in Buenos Aires needs access to cutting-edge oncology data, they no longer have to pay a toll to a gatekeeper in London. The archive of human knowledge becomes a living, breathing entity, owned by absolutely no one, and therefore accessible to absolutely everyone. The sheer scale of this transition is staggering. We are migrating the entire history of human achievement onto an unhackable planetary hard drive. This is not just a software update for academic journals. It is a fundamental evolution of the scientific method itself. You are witnessing the exact moment when trust is removed from the fragile hands of humans and permanently encoded into the indestructible fabric of the digital world. You spent your whole life believing that the official narrative printed in a textbook was the highest form of truth. You were programmed to bow to the authority of a prestigious logo on a journal cover. I'm telling you to let that illusion die. The authority of the future is not a logo. It is the cryptographic hash of a transparent dataset. The academic elites are terrified of this glowing web of light because in a fully transparent system, prestige cannot protect a manipulated chart. As this decentralized network continues to expand, swallowing the old, corrupt institutions node by node, we are finally stepping out of the dark ages of irreproducible data. The architect knows that the war is already won. The gatekeepers have fallen. But as the smoke clears from the collapse of this archaic system, we must look at the landscape that remains. We are not just fixing broken experiments. We are fundamentally preparing humanity for a completely new era of absolute certainty. The glow of the decentralized network fades into the physical light of dawn, breaking over a massive, futuristic observatory. Inside, a lone scientist looks up at a monitor displaying a single, globally consensus-backed data point. The screen does not show a fragile theory awaiting approval from a shadow committee. It shows mathematical certainty. The light of a new enlightenment washes over the room, clearing the ghosts of manipulated data. But as that researcher closes their terminal, their role in this story ends. We have viewed this collapse and rebirth through the eyes of the meta-researcher and the system architect. But this new infrastructure is not meant for them. It is meant for you. The gatekeepers have been mathematically removed from the equation, which means the responsibility of navigating this newly transparent reality now rests entirely on your shoulders. For the past hour, I have systematically dismantled your baseline trust in the institutions that govern human knowledge. You watched half of your textbooks turn to dust, witnessed the tragic waste of Alzheimer's trials, and saw the trillion-dollar academic cartel exposed for what it was. It would be easy to look at the wreckage of the replication crisis and conclude that human discovery has completely failed. I need you to discard that illusion immediately. Consider this your final lesson, the foundational axiom for the world we are stepping into. The replication crisis was never the death of science. It was the exact opposite. What you witnessed was the brutal, necessary stress test of an archaic system. You were watching the immune system of truth finally waking up and going to war against a massive infection of human ego. By ruthlessly shedding 50% of our false assumptions, we are not losing ground, we are optimizing our trajectory. Think of it as burning off the dead weight that has anchored us to the past. Because we are purging these fraudulent data sets from our archives, we are rapidly accelerating toward a future where every medical treatment and technological leap is anchored to an unbreakable foundation. We started this investigation in the dark casino of p-hacking, where data was tortured until it confessed to whatever the researcher wanted. We navigated the corrupt economics of the publish or perish cartel, understanding perfectly why so many desperate minds chose to cheat. We found the root cause of the disease, and instead of applying a temporary bandage, we chose to amputate the rot entirely. We watched artificial intelligence algorithms hunt down the terminal digit anomalies that human eyes missed, and we deployed cryptographic ledgers to burn the publishing monopolies to the ground. We did not merely patch a few broken psychological studies or redact a handful of neuroscience papers. We fundamentally upgraded the operating system of human knowledge for the rest of the 21st century. This means that the targeted genetic therapies, the decentralized energy grids, and the artificial intelligence frameworks of tomorrow will be built upon absolute mathematical bedrock rather than the shifting sand of a tenured professor's ambition. We have replaced blind faith with cryptographic verification, ensuring that the architecture of our future cannot collapse under the weight of a statistical lie. To survive in this new era, you must fundamentally rewire your understanding of what discovery actually entails. You must embrace the undeniable fact that science is not a noun. It is not a dusty encyclopedia resting on a library shelf filled with static, unquestionable decrees. Science is a dangerously aggressive verb. It is the relentless, violent process of destruction and subsequent refinement. Every single retracted paper you see in the news is not a failure. It is a profound victory for the network. Every exposed fraud is a triumph of our new methodology. We have engineered the only philosophical framework in human history that actively rewards its own dismantling. The system is designed to break, and in breaking, it becomes infinitely stronger and completely immune to the biases of its creators. As we navigate the year 2026 and look beyond, we are crossing the threshold into a mathematically incorruptible utopia of open science. We have stripped away the prestige, the profit margins, and the velvet ropes. What remains is the raw, unyielding power of decentralized consensus. A machine that demands absolute honesty, operating outside the jurisdiction of human frailty. In this visionary landscape, the ultimate flex of human intelligence is no longer standing at a podium, fiercely defending a fragile hypothesis and desperately trying to prove that you are right. The true mark of genius is possessing the intellectual humility to engineer an autonomous, transparent system that mathematically prevents you and everyone else from ever being wrong. I want you to carry this new framework into your daily life. If this investigation successfully shattered your old illusions and equipped you with the tools to navigate the modern information war, hit the subscribe button to continue this research with us. We are continuously building the archive of the future, and your active engagement is the exact consensus mechanism that keeps this transparent architecture alive. The era of the untouchable academic oracle is permanently over, replaced by the beautiful, cold precision of verified data. We survived the collapse of our own assumptions and built a flawless monument to reality in the ruins. Now you know the undeniable truth of how the modern world actually works, and it is your absolute responsibility to demand nothing less. Live with it. Class dismissed.